So, on this video of the truth transgression, or verite cast, as usual, um, I would just like to talk about more so at a philosophical level. I mean, that's what most of these videos are really here for. Discerning the primary motives for our existence, and I suppose the best way to put it is trying to figure out exactly what solutions are laid before us, what options are available, and how to progress forwards. And most people who search for videos like this may indeed only have questions and no answers of their own, but there is always the possibility that someone may happen upon it. And if I in my searching have found the answers, then clearly I wouldn't be here, would I? So essentially, we're as we stare down the barrel of the petrodollar having collapsed in on itself, and the state of America and its economic prosperity is in the most precarious position in all of history without its populace even realizing it. We're in a pretty tough spot, and we're honestly lucky that the currency hasn't gone to Weimar levels quite yet. Weimar Germany was a catastrophe. I mean, we still have some time along that timeline to meet that standard, but the thing is, we aren't quite there yet. So when we look at the state of our society, fiscally, we have a fiat-based currency that has essentially no backing as of now, because typically the strength of a nation's currency is leveraged upon the production of its domestic products and services. And as the United States, our primary key organizations aren't necessarily commodities. They're particularly solely doled out on our behalf, at our behest, like Google, for example, or Amazon, etc. They have stakes and holdings in every country across the globe, so these organizations leverage their services wherever they see fit and wherever they hold value. And that's just how it is. I'm no economist, so and this is the thing. Even actual economists don't really seem to have a firm grasp of exactly what's going on. Either the political ramblings of whatever party that they belong to prevent them from encapsulating the full scope of the issues, or they just have no clue what's going on, and they have no idea how to conceptualize it. And if you look at a system that's solely based around a completely imaginary currency, especially one which has no basis, like the sole backing for the petrodollar, if for those of you who do not know, this was the deal that the United States made with the Middle East, or more specifically like Saudi Arabia and the oil princes, whatever jurisdictions or provinces that may be, that they trade all of their oil, their crude oil, in the US dollar. So essentially, since oil is an essential commodity for all countries across the globe, any country that has a deficit in oil and does not produce enough oil for themselves essentially has all of their domestic product leveraged as basis for the value of the American dollar. because all these countries require oil. So we can essentially set our own prices for a lot of our goods, leveraging that fact. But this is now no longer the case. So our prices currently follow the momentum of history. So where things have been in the past. However, as things become more scarce, and a lot of countries seek to offload their American dollars, the only roundabout way really is to maintain the strength of our currency is basically I don't know, like double converting our currency from let's say, because China won't really trade in the U.S. dollar anymore, or at least they try not to. Russia most certainly won't. So we have like double currency conversions type thing. Like we'll send our money to fucking Germany or the UK to have it converted to the pound or the euro, and have that basically forwarded off to the next country to purchase their goods. And of course, every time you do something like that, you lose some value of that currency as well. I mean, obviously, this is far from the only reason for the denigration of our current economic conditions. I mean, that's probably not even an issue at all, to be honest. It's just a logistical factor. I'm not even sure what the actual numbers or the loss margins for things like that to purchase certain commodities would even be, because we as a nation, we really only produce services at this point, and as well as military armaments. What happens if one day we no longer lead in military technology and no one has a desire for United States weapons? We have no basis at all for our intellectual property, or our excuse me, our dollar at all, our currency. No basis at all for it. No edifice. No, because there's no fundamental commodities that are coveted by other nations. And even then, like, military arms are something that's a rather tenuous. It's a tenuous market. It's not something that's always in high demand. The only way that this would work is if you basically incited war in every other country across the globe and just became a merchant of death, so to speak, and just sell armaments to each of the countries that are involved. Which, I mean, honestly, and now that I bring this up, it kind of does make sense. I mean, look at Ukraine and so on. What have we been doing? We've been giving them our own currency to basically purchase our weapons from us, in order to continue their wars. Almost like a tech demo for Europe. Once the rest of Europe ends up joining the wars, then they'll be like, oh, look at us, we have this amazing storefront, the Shopify website for fucking like Helldivers 2 style 500 kilogram bomb that can be fired through a fucking howitzer. Yeah, you bet not. Something like that, essentially. But it's this system we exist in presently. Eventually, it'll leave America behind, because unlike the United States, places like China and India have their own industry, their own manufacturing, and the production of their goods is adjusted relative to their own local economy, which is why a lot of the goods that come from these nations are relatively cheap, so to speak, and they're heavily marked up once they reach our markets. for extreme profits for a lot of these companies like Nike, Adidas, Puma, etc. Um, it's just how it is. And as I was stating before in the other video, the stock markets tend to drive factors, all these cost saving measures that we end up seeing. They aren't, they're things that end up not being passed on to the consumer itself, because the consumer is no longer the goal for a lot of these companies to satiate. Their primary constituent is their shareholders. That's how it is. That's how it always has been. You speak to, well, not how it always has been, but for at least in recent memory, because as companies became so large, they could no longer expand to newer markets. It became, well, what diverse range and array of products and services can we offer, and how do we make these things most efficient? You can't tell me that now that we have since optimized with technology and all of these other new advancements, that all of these companies are suddenly not profitable, or are no longer profitable. It makes absolutely no sense. A lot of these companies are laying people off, etc. No, this is just to make their books look better for each quarter. That's really what it comes down to. At the end of the day, they also do sink a lot of money into extraneous, superfluous things, and it ends up becoming completely. It's just farcical. That's all it is. It's just a huge farce, and it's done right in the face of everybody. And for the past 15 or so years, right after the Occupy Wall Street thing, I mean, when people first started noticing the severe economic disparity, immediately afterwards, like 2008, 2009, did you see these organizations begin driving a wedge between people in terms of race and culture, etc.? Things that were, well, rhetoric that wasn't typically uttered, or at least not with so much fervor as it is now, compared to, well, in contrast to the way it was in the past. I mean, you just need to look in recent memory, look by comparison. When I was a very little kid, none of these things were ever an issue. Race was never even a topic that was mentioned. I didn't even hear the N-word when I was a kid till I was like maybe 11 years old, and it was from a black person. And it's not like I hadn't been around black kids the entire time when I was a kid. It's just something that really wasn't commonly uttered. It wasn't a popular phrase in the vernacular. As you all know, or should know, only recently has the profanity and vulgarity become such a hot topic, such a hot commodity that everybody desires, a free commodity that they can adopt and affect for themselves. One that gives them a false sense of solidarity where there is actually none. There is no national shared interest. There is no shared culture in that regard. There is no shared codified system of ethics. It's just a shared likeness of a particular thing, of pop culture. I mean, there are many countries out there where we can share interests in certain pop culture items, where their interests are disparate from us, and they may even hate us. They may want us, each and every last one of us, dead. That's just a matter of course. And people fail to distinguish between genuine friendship and camaraderie and individuals who only share a niche common interest in one particular area, a one pedant, just one pedantic stroke of solidarity, and they use that as a keystone to enforce their other ideals, that they conform to these people's beliefs and their bias. Typically, when people when people commit themselves to a certain narrative, in one instance, they tend to conform to things that aren't necessarily a part of their initial belief system or structure of beliefs. So, when I'm thinking about these things, the only reason I mention them is because I'm looking at the bigger picture philosophically, like how people view things. And for people to recognize problems, there's a hierarchy, much like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's also a it's very similar in its order of its importance, because naturally, when it comes to group identity, when it comes to more tribal things, if you're forced to deal with the idea that someone is actually an imminent physical threat, and to your life, your family, your very existence, your ability to do anything, that you will be imprisoned if you do not rise to the occasion and match this person in that regard. That these issues in this term, in way of things, identity politics, was weaponized to distract people, because economic disparity is a higher it's a level of threat that's such a higher abstraction, at a greater level of abstraction than any other threat, really, for the most part, outside of like political. I say it goes from the tribal, cultural, the filial unit, to economic, and then political slash philosophical threats to your existence. And right now we find ourselves beset on all fronts in this regard. Not just the filial unit, but fiscally, as far as economic conditions, and political and philosophical. They use these other the low level attacks as a as a red herring, to draw everyone's attention away from the actions that they take at the greater levels of abstraction, to further solidify and foment their power throughout society. At the same time, they extract everything from you without you even realizing it. Because you don't have the time to sit around and understand the fact that these companies, like for example, a farmer is selling a product for the same, if not lower price than they ever were in the past, but for some reason that product, once it reaches the supermarket, despite the fact there were no changes in regulation, tax law, or any other logistics concerns outside of maybe a slight increase in gas prices, that the prices somehow managed to double, and maybe in some instances triple or quadruple. And you ask yourself, well, these products come at a basis of need, and they're putting the screws to the farmers and the producers of said products, and all across the board, even in areas where there is no scarcity, do the prices, or have the prices, increased dramatically. And it doesn't quite seem right, does it? Because it makes it seem as though there is a certain level of black propaganda And if you don't know what black propaganda is, it's basically like presenting a false front, like a facade. So let's say you're an enemy of somebody, and you're in the opposition party from this person. So what you would do as a person who's going to commit black propaganda is you would dress up as that individual, and you would essentially enact some kind of harm under the guise that it was that that individual of the party that you oppose. You would wear their insignia, their brand, and commit some act of impropriety as you do that. So the premise is much the same here in this regard, where companies will say, well, economic conditions are bad, therefore we must raise prices. Or, the times are tough, so we need to let go of X employee for some inexplicable reason. When in most cases, or like let's say, and I've had this one happen to me, we need to let go of X employee and put that work of that employee we just fired onto somebody else. And in that instance, it was me. And that's something that happens quite often, and a lot of these companies think that they can get away with it. But at the end of the day, they see record profits as they also are cutting their costs, and none of that is seen by the employee themselves, or anybody for that matter, as prices as a whole across the board are skyrocketing. You'll even see like things for property values and so on, and of course everyone's out for maximum profit, but there's a point where gouging prices is absolutely absurd, and it almost seems as though it's done almost entirely out of principle in a lot of cases, because you'll have places in New York City, for example, that an owner of a building will try to rent out like a little unit that's about like 500 square feet or something like that for $50,000 a month, and that unit goes unoccupied for years. Now, let me ask you, what money are they making off that unit? There is none. They're not making any money off that unit. I don't fully understand the machinations behind this, but essentially, from my understanding of this is that when a lot of these things happen, they hold on to that property, and what they do is they take the assessed value, how they assess the value of their property. So if they set the rent to like $50,000, and a lot of other property holders in New York City will do much the same. So you sort of have an oligopoly or a trust of sorts going on there in that regard as well, where people informally agree on prices to set for real estate in these areas. And what ends up happening is that that prices across the board artificially go up temporarily. Well, not even temporarily, just in general, for however duration they see fit to do so, and they can then leverage the theoretical value of their property, as a way to get new loans or anything from banks to spend money. So they basically create money from nothing, and they do so to get low interest loans, much like how a lot of the wealthy avoid taxes altogether. and they will use whatever money that they pool from those loans to basically enhance their own wealth long term and increase the growth of their overall wealth. And they just continue leveraging these properties towards that end. And I guess it must be such a lucrative practice because it's so common. There's a lot of areas now though where that's not so much the case, but in the larger cities they always do this. And if it is not just a scheme to basically endlessly generate wealth, then it's a malevolent act carried out by people who possess so much wealth that their only desire is to prevent individuals who they disapprove of class-wise from even occupying the space. Which, I almost want to argue towards that end, since a lot of what has transpired since the Occupy Wall Street movement in 2009 has been so overzealous and just, how do I say it? I'm losing my words. Maybe I brain damaged myself with all my ridiculous bullshit, but it's not merely impropriety. It's a malevolence that is unparalleled throughout all of human history, just to solidify one's own hold or claim to power, and that's essentially what it is. That's all it is. It's just a red herring. It's the red herring, which is their key to the gates to the throne. That is their mandate of heaven, so to speak. That's their, their one-armed man. As long as they maintain power, they do not give a damn. Now, how long can this stuff last for? Who knows? Many people who observe our system recognize how unsustainable it is. I do not even need to crunch the numbers to tell you that this system based solely around fiat currency is not tenable for future success. But the thing is, this will be allowed to succeed for as long as these people have tendrils and influence in other nations that maintain relative value. And as long as it is the case that these individuals who are responsible for a lot of this malcontent the past 15 or so years, as long as they possess power, as long as they're able to pull the strings of the world overall, that this system will continue to preside. And you assume that these people have care for their progeny or their children and so on, and that they'll pass it down to the next generation. But there's no counting on that entirely. There's no counting on, fresh minds that are capable of discerning injustice from, righteousness. It's unlikely, especially if they're raised with the same principles and, virtue as their parents. It's unlikely that they'll be able, or even will recognize the impropriety and remedy it for themselves. That's something that's likely never to occur. So, there are likely many things that I failed to cover in this, but a lot of people struggle, and many people are caught up with the idea that they need to have independence in their lives, that they need to emancipate themselves from the family. Which, just by the way, is a notion that's it's only really present in the Western world. This is development where, of course, a lot of what society deems attractive in an individual is something that's imparted throughout youth, but it's also what is attributed to those characteristics. Being alone and isolated and self-sufficient as a man is considered to be extremely masculine in Western countries, and that's just how it is. It doesn't matter if you're out here taking care of your family and so on, because women in general will view that as deprivation of resources from themselves, as opposed to you're a kind-hearted, righteous individual who wishes to preserve their family. Basically, I'm saying preserve your economic conditions as much as possible. Prepare yourself to weather a storm. Don't merely cast everything aside and sink all of your money on housing alone. Nearly half your income is taxed from you. So at the very worst, find yourself a roommate, or maybe a room somewhere, rent that out, and sit there for a while and sustain yourself as an individual, which is all anyone can really ask for. If you're of the same mindset as I am, and you do not wish to even give a single modern woman the satisfaction of having a relationship, then work solely and only to serve yourself. As in, don't work in construction, don't become an electrician, don't become a mechanic, don't become a plumber, don't become an HVAC technician. Just work in general jobs like, I don't know, do DoorDash or an Uber or something, and maybe pick up some valuable skills on the side, and just keep passively schooling in the background and learning new things as much as you can, without contributing those skills to society as a whole. And only withhold your value as an individual until society has rectified its conduct and we're back on the right track. That's essentially my mantra going forwards. Because as you learn as a man, not only do you not, possess authority, not only does no one respect your word, even if you are a successful individual, even if you are a resounding pillar of your community, it doesn't matter. Because nobody actually respects you. Nobody has any respect for your word, no one has any respect for your work, nobody has any respect for your virtues. They only seek to reap things from you. They only seek to understand what value can they extract from your existence. That's it. That's all they care for. And that's all they'll ever care for. So until you as man have your authority returned to you, there is no merit in going forwards, putting forth any work in any other regard, to benefit anyone besides yourself. Anyways, this has been a nice little episode of the truth transgression. I can't even say it right every time. I botch it. You'll have a good one, and Merry Christmas.